In this video, we'll cover what you need to get started in beekeeping. I'll cover all the stuff you need to get, roughly how much it costs, and where you can get it all. I'll also give you some advice about how to actually get going. Let's get started. First off, there are three kinds of beekeepers: hobbyists, sideliners, and commercial. Hobbyists have a few hives, usually in their backyard. The good hobbyist beekeeper makes more than enough honey for all their friends and family, and they enjoy working with bees. Sideliners have between 10 to 30 hives or so on average, and make some side income from their bees. Sometimes they sell honey at the local farmer's market, for example. Finally, commercial beekeepers have hundreds to thousands of hives and make a living off of bees, meaning they either make a lot of honey or they provide pollination services to farmers. Some commercial beekeepers also produce bees for sale, either hives or queens. Queen breeding in particular has become a lucrative business in the last couple of decades. This video is for hobbyist beekeepers. It can also be for people who want to be sideliners but are just getting started. Throughout, I'll assume that you want to keep a couple hives in your backyard. I'll give advice on larger scale beekeeping in a future video. Here's an overview of the things we'll cover. First, you need knowledge. You have to have some idea of what you're doing, of course. Then you need a beehive and equipment. Then personal protective equipment. Space for your hives is next. Next up is the bees, of course. And then finally, time, interest, and energy, all of which is important for learning beekeeping these days. Let's cover these one by one. First up is knowledge. Your initial goal should be to understand beekeeping in principle before you try to do it in practice. If you do it this way, you'll make your life a whole lot easier. Of course, you can just jump right in and learn as you go, but it's stressful, and you'll likely lose many more hives than you need to, as you learn to reinvent the wheel over and over again. Also, it's not hard to get a basic understanding of beekeeping. I'll give you a plan of action. I would start with a book. Ideally, you should do this in the winter before you start beekeeping. Most people are going to buy their first hive in the spring, as I'll discuss later, so that winter before is the ideal time to read that first book and get comfortable with the idea of beekeeping. I have to stress, of course, that there is only so much you can learn from a book, but books are good for two reasons. First, a good introductory book will give you a nice overview and the confidence necessary to feel like you at least know what is supposed to be happening when you get your bees. Second, and this is true even if you're an experienced beekeeper, there's a vast store of knowledge in books about bees, and there's always more to learn. There are basically two kinds of books, and you should get one or more of each. First, there is the introductory book that covers beekeeping quickly, with the needs of the new beekeeper in mind. This is the book to read the winter before you start. This book should cover all the major topics with enough depth to get the basic idea across and to give you a basic plan of action for your first year. Ideally, such a book shouldn't be more than a couple hundred easy-to-read pages. Pictures are nice, but the value of the content is what matters. Hence, you should be able to read this book in a few weeks, and then go back over it a few times. Afterwards, you should feel comfortable, knowing in principle at least how beekeeping works. As far as particular recommendations, there are many options out there. I'm going to plug my own book, of course, no surprise, because I wrote it, so it covers the topics as I think they should be covered. But to be honest, there are several other books out there that are just as good. But if you like my teaching style as shown in these videos, then you might like my approach. With respect to finding introductory books, I'll give some general advice. There are two kinds of books out there. There are those written by professional beekeepers and those written by hobbyists. I would recommend the ones written by professional beekeepers. Professional beekeeper can refer to bee scientists like myself or a commercial beekeeper. Basically, a professional beekeeper is someone who has worked with bees for a living for many years. Although there are enthusiastic hobbyists who know a great deal about bees and are fine beekeepers, there is really nothing like doing something for a living 40 hours a week for decades. A professional beekeeper has just done a lot more beekeeping than a hobbyist, so they usually have more insight. I want to stress that what I said is true on average. Some books by professional beekeepers are not that great, and some books by hobbyists are wonderful, so there's a lot of variation here. What I'm saying is that on average, if you find a well-written, easy-to-follow book by a professional, it's probably of higher quality than one by a hobbyist. I said there is a different kind of book, so let's get to that. This is a large reference book that is comprehensive in nature. The first book that I've been discussing is a quick introduction, but beekeeping knowledge is vast. You don't need to know everything to get started, or even to be successful, but if you really come to love beekeeping, then eventually you're going to want a real reference. I recommend The Hive and the Honeybee. It's the classic reference, and I think it's still the best. The only thing you have to be careful about is the stuff on Varroa, which is badly out of date. Hive beetle stuff is also out of date. But for basic beekeeping, it's great, and thorough on all topics. Also, you shouldn't be getting your pest management advice from any book anyway. That field moves so fast that any book is out of date within a year or two. I'll cover later where to get that sort of information. Of course, there are other big reference books which you could get in lieu of The Hive and the Honeybee, so it's up to you. This book, for example, is pretty good too. That's it for beekeeping books. There is one other kind of book that you could get, which is optional. Bee biology is a different subject, but if you love bees, you might be interested in a book on that too. Again, I stress that you don't need a book like this for beekeeping, but in general, the more you know about bees, the better the beekeeper you'll ultimately become. There's Mark Winston's older book and my newer book. Both are good and cover all the basics. The newer book is obviously more up to date. But the older book goes into more depth on some topics, which I omitted because of space constraints. If you're supercharged to learn about bees, I would eventually try to get both. Books are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to knowledge, so let's move on to the second and probably the most important source of information outside of direct experience. This is your local beekeeping club. Most cities have a beekeeping club, and some areas have several. I recently spoke at this one, for example, and had a great time. Beekeeping clubs are a wonderful place to get information about beekeeping because all beekeeping is ultimately local in nature. What I mean by this is that although there are common beekeeping practices that you can learn from books or videos, how those techniques are applied depends on where you are. Questions like when and how much honey to take off, or when to do a split, have very different answers depending on whether you're in New York, Georgia, or California. Great advice in Ohio can be bad advice when applied with no consideration of the differences in climate and seasonality in Arizona. Experienced local beekeepers are ultimately going to be your best source of information, and the easiest way to meet them is at your local beekeeping club. I said I'd mention later where to get Varroa advice. This is the main place. Ask around at your beekeeping club for what's working. YouTube is also a good place to look. Beekeeping clubs are also fun. I give talks to many clubs, and they always seem to be full of friendly people having a good time sharing what they know about their favorite hobby. Also, if you make friends with people at the club, you can probably go with them to their hives to get more hands-on experience. Having someone watch you do your beekeeping and give you feedback when you're just starting is the difference between fast progress and frustration. Finally, some beekeeping clubs organize group purchases of bees, potentially saving you money. Some even organize yearly swarm capture. I really can't say enough about the importance of joining a beekeeping club when you're just getting started. It's really one of the most important things. Next up is the internet. Since you found this video, you obviously don't need help finding beekeeping videos. A lot of good stuff is online, so make use of it. In general, books versus videos is a classic trade-off. A book goes into more depth, but a video has the advantage of a picture being worth 1,000 words. That's why it's best to both buy some books and watch videos. Moving on, there are beekeeping classes, but I don't recommend these for beginners. You can learn everything you need with the other sources of information and direct experience. Classes, such as a master beekeeping course, are better suited to experienced beekeepers who want to learn some advanced topic. Finally, the essential source of information is trial and error. You must be willing to try new things with your bees. You will lose some hives along the way, but learning to be a beekeeper is a process that takes a couple of years at least, and there will be ups and downs. Focus on the process and the fact that you're learning from your mistakes and getting better, rather than that this or that hive didn't make it, or that you didn't make much honey this year. That's a good place to break. In the next video, we'll cover equipment, bees, and all the rest. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. See you next time.